tell us where you are now with this, and tell us what the next steps are.
Yeah, so I'm doing my PhD in the biomedical sciences. I do traumatic brain injury research, actually.
Mm.
And so, the one thing that, kind of getting that type of degree does is it makes you pretty good at reading stuff and kind of understanding what might not make sense, and trying to find
Mhm.
gaps kind of in things that others write, believe it or not.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so, after all this had happened, my father had, looked into, seeking legal counsel, to try to understand, what had gone wrong, and how we could be helped in those ways. And they sat on it for about 2.5 years and did nothing.
Mhm.
And so my dad called me one day. I remember I was at Starbucks, and he called me, and he was like, "They just told me that there's nothing they could do." And we just kind of sat there and we're like, "Are you kidding me? It's been 2.5 years, and you only have 3 years before, pretty much you have to, um, you know, uh, what is it? Kind of submit your,
Mhm.
um, I guess, admission to sue, or else
Mhm.
that's it."
Mhm. You
And
lose it,
so
yeah.
we kind of sat there, and I was like, you know what? Send me the report from the hospital. It's what, like 12 or 14,000 pages of just craziness, because it's not really that organized and all this stuff. I was like, send it to me. Let's go through it. Let's read it ourselves and see what went on. Let's read their notes. Let's read everything that went through it. And then, my dad has friends that are physicians, as do I. There are a lot of physicians in my field that also pursue research, and to try to understand things. And so we spent months, going through the, you know, all of the notes and all of the records ourselves, and we were able to find those gaps ourselves, and then,
Mhm. Mhm.
seek other legal counsel to kind of put this sort of through and understand really what's going on. So, when my dad had mentioned, that his blood level was 3.7 grams per deciliter, his hemoglobin level was that, or, Rebecca's mentioning that, his H&H was kept really low. That was from us going through the records years
Dude.
after the fact, when the legal counsel who was supposed to be doing this didn't. And that was us educating ourselves on what
Mhm.
had gone on. So that way
Mhm.
we could actually understand if things went wrong, or if this was kind of normal procedure and we were just shit out of
Mhm.
luck.
Mhm.
And to be honest, when we went through it, we had actually found that throughout the course, especially leading up to before he went into cardiac arrest the first time, they had kept his blood level very low. They had kept it, I don't think we mentioned it before, but his hemoglobin, it was at around 7 grams per deciliter, which we
Mhm.
had, heard from, experts that that is actually pretty low. And
Mhm.
then on the day that he went into cardiac arrest, it did dip to 3.7. And what's crazy is that we cross-referenced, as Rebecca had mentioned before, that before that hemodialysis machine, and we can actually see when the machine went down. That's in the records. They have, like,
Wow.
thousands of pages of when it just stops working. And in the hours leading up to that, it went down twice within 2 hours leading up to it. And so we cross-referenced that. We cross-referenced how, all the drugs that he was on, how they were weaning him off, and how he had to be put back on the vasopressors right after. And we
Mhm.
also were able to cross-reference when his fingers and toes actually went from being musky to having, they call it necrosis, which is the actual, or gangrene, which is when that tissue actually dies. None of the
Mhm.
tissue was dead until after the cardiac arrest. And so, I, and not just me, but we all really put in the time to go through, all of the records to really understand what was happening, and where we think the care could have been better, and where we
Mhm.
think that there could have been mistakes made. And it was crazy to us that, one, you can't really depend on legal counsel all the time to do this type
Mhm.
of work. You have to do it yourself and bring it to them so that they can build a case.
Mhm.
And two, there was no communication from the doctors about any of this throughout the
Mm.
time of his stay and afterwards. We didn't even know that they nicked the pulmonary artery until after. We had to read that in the report. Are you
They
kidding
never
me?
told me that.
They just said that he was, there were complications and he had to be, kind of kept, because when they do the surgery, you're kept really cold. You're essentially dead. It's open heart surgery. They didn't say why. We didn't find out why until after. And so, one thing, not to change it too far, but, we actually did go and we had a meeting with, the surgeon years later. And they invited us to, to the hospital to kind of extend what we thought they were extending an arm to us. They were like, hey, let's talk about what happened and let's see how we could help. And so, we went to Boston and we sat in a room with the administrator, some other person who was supposed to be kind of like their prosthetics guy, and the surgeon who had done my father's surgery. And they sat us down and the surgeon kind of started off the meeting and pretty much said, what had happened was you had come in for surgery. There were some complications. And, unfortunately, the outcome was suboptimal, but, you are alive. And that was pretty much it. He never went over the complications from the surgery itself. He never went over the complications of the care when he went into cardiac arrest or any of the hurdles that he was going through throughout his stay at all. It was as if he just didn't even remember or think to actually go through the documents. And that was really hard for us because we're all sitting there and we're thinking two things. One, I can't believe this person just made it seem like, everything was good that happened, that it was almost like a success. And two, the fact that he had sat us down and went through his care kind of sequentially without mentioning any of the missteps that happened, pretty much told us that this must be what he says to other people who haven't actually gone through the medical records. So because we went through the records, we questioned him. We said,
knew the truth. You knew the truth. Yeah.
Can you tell us about the nick and the pulmonary? Because now we know that happened. He didn't even, he was like, whoa, like he was kind of thrown off by the fact that we knew this stuff. And then we asked him how could he have lost that much blood? And there was no evidence of pericardial perfusion, which is kind of like where a lot of the experts went at first. Oh, blood probably pooled around the heart. It didn't. There's actually a line in the notes, in the actual records that says there's no evidence of pericardial perfusion after he went into cardiac arrest. No answer for where the blood went. And we even asked him, do you think that the fact that this hemodialysis machine was going down and went down twice in the hours before he went into cardiac arrest, could that have contributed to the blood loss? And he didn't have an answer for us. He said, I'm going to have to look more into it. And that was it. That's all we got.